I was reminded this week, as I was visiting with my parents, of a story from my childhood that I'd completely forgotten about. It's a good story, though, and so it bears mentioning. When I was a child, we lived in Hawaii for a while, and my dad was the commander of the company of military police and others. Part of the duties of the military police at the camp, of course, was to guard the gates in and out of the base. And one day in the 1970s, there was a Japanese general that was touring Hawaii as part of a military delegation of some sort, and they came to the gate guard at Pearl Harbor. And they pull up, and as he pulled up, he asked his driver to stop for a second. He wanted to talk to the guard. So they pull up, they stop, he rolls his window down. Of course, the Marine salutes. General calls him over. He runs over. Marine enlisted guard salutes him. And the general says, I have a question for you. I was wondering if you can tell me where the Arizona Memorial is. I will paraphrase the Marine's response, because it's a Marine, mind you. And he says, well, sir, you ought to know. You sunk the darn thing. His career took an immediate turn downward at that point. Understand he ended up in Adak, Alaska, not too long after that, so not quite the exotic location of Hawaii. See, those in power expect to be treated differently. There is this expectation of respect. And of course, when it isn't given, there are dire consequences. Power. Power is an interesting thing. It does interesting things to those who seek great power. And of course, I'm sure many of you have heard the quote from Lord Acton that power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think we find no real problem backing up that quote with those in power. But of course, power seems to have other effects as well. Certainly those in power expect to be treated differently from those around them. And they tend to surround themselves with others who ensure they are treated differently. So much so that over time I think they become more and more isolated from the realities of the world. And then the human ego, being what it is, seems to take advantage of this isolation. Their view of self becomes bigger and bigger to the point where they begin to miss opportunities that are presented to them when they aren't presented in the right manner. And of course, the proper manner begins with deference and submission. In our readings today, I think we see good examples of how we can miss God acting in our lives when we wait for God to come to us in a way that meets our own ego's expectations. In our scriptures today, we encounter two folks whose egos seem to have taken control. In our Old Testament lesson, Naaman is a great general. He's won many battles. He has many servants. He even has the ear of the king of Aram. The king's very willing to do whatever it takes to cure Naaman of his leprosy. So he hears of this prophet Elisha, decides to pay him a visit so that he may be cured. And he figures that if he brings enough money, he can buy the cure that he needs. Those in power tend to assume that others are only looking for power as well. So he travels to Israel, seeks out Elisha. What was he expecting? Well, based on the story, my assumption would be that he expected Elisha to come out, to recognize his authority, to accept his payment, and personally spend the time necessary to cure him of his disease. And as he cured him, he would pay him the respect that he so richly deserves. He would submit to his authority, the authority of money and position. He expected to be catered to. But Elisha not only doesn't spend a long time with him ministering to his needs, he doesn't invite him to inside his house. Even more, Elisha doesn't even bother to go outside. Instead, he sends a servant. Go wash in the Jordan. That's good enough. Bye. Have a nice day. So long. Quick dip and you're good. From the servant. A general is never treated this way. So the general misses the fact that Elisha has told him exactly what he needs to do to be healed. He's given him exactly what he seeks. But you see, Elisha didn't do it the right way. He didn't meet the general's ego's expectations. Luckily for Naaman, his servants actually hear the message and convince him to step into this clearly inferior Israelite river, and he is cured. Interesting. The one in power, so focused on keeping his own position, so focused on ensuring that those around him treated him appropriately, that he missed the opportunity for healing that God had given him through Elisha. But those who were not focused on their own power, they saw that opportunity and finally convinced him to give it a try in spite of Elisha's perceived rudeness. So in Luke, we see something similar. A Pharisee has invited Jesus to attend a supper feast. Now, in Roman times, those in power often held banquets and invited large numbers of people. Not so much out of the goodness of their heart, but the more people that you invite, then the more people who will invite you to their parties. The better you made your feast, the more who would show up and then be in your debt. So, to make this feast all the more enjoyable for his fellows in power, he invites Jesus. He invites him so they can hear what this new young teacher and prophet has to say. And what did he expect? Well, perhaps they would engage in scholarly debate. Perhaps Jesus will match wits with him or with others whom he has invited. An evening of eating and discussing the day's great controversies. Must have been excited when Jesus walked into his house. Yes! The one who everyone's been talking about. He's here at my party. Surely this is going to be a great feast. This is going to be one talked about for a long time. One that might even elevate my position of power. Now, for once, Jesus seemed to be following the rules set up by society. He has come to the feast. He's even sitting in his proper place at the table. He seems to be submitting to the power of the Pharisee, recognizing the requirements of society. And Simon, the Pharisee, he must have been thrilled. Looking ahead, he's thinking, I was the one who will be known as the person who threw the great dinner party for Jesus. The one, where we finally found the flaws in his logic, the one where he knocked him down a notch or two and showed him who was really in charge. But a funny thing happens on the way to that ending. Even before they could finish their dinner, in walks a woman. Not just any woman, but one defined as a sinner by those around the table. Someone not wanted. Someone who could be safely ignored, though, because those outside of the powerful establishment should know their place. But she sits behind Jesus, quietly begins to wash his feet. And she cries, softly, quietly, and uses her tears to clean his feet. And then she uses her hair to wipe them. There's so much symbology here. We don't really have the time to talk about it all, but the bottom line is that this is not at all what should be happening at my feast. Simon is appalled. Hospitality required that he allowed her to enter, but doesn't she know her place? And doesn't Jesus know who this person is? Someone beneath him. Someone only meant to serve the needs of those in power. This is someone we can just cast aside. This is not how someone in power should act, especially a supposed prophet. Simon is so caught up in his own power, his own position. He's so caught up in his own efforts to protect and grow his power that he misses the message. He misses the opportunity to simply be with Christ. But the woman, much like Naaman's servant, sees the opportunity that has been presented to her and takes advantage of it. Just as Naaman's servants see that all he has to do is take a dip in the Jordan and God will handle the rest, This woman sees that all she has to do is bow to the true authority in the room, and God will take care of the rest. And that, my friends, I think is the hard part for all of us, bowing to the true authority in the room. Naaman couldn't do it, couldn't even see it. Simon was blind to it. Both were blinded by their own egos. How often do our own egos set expectations for us? How often do our own egos get in the way of what God has done for us? You know that I truly believe that God is constantly giving us opportunities to be healed, opportunities to praise, opportunities to serve. But I think that I've missed many opportunities because of my own expectations of how I should be treated. And they get in the way. What do we expect? Every one of us has our own type of power. Every one of us has our own ego. When we focus on building our own power, creating our own empire, insulating ourselves from the outside world by our own fortresses of ego, we miss the opportunity to stop and celebrate what God is doing for us. We miss the opportunity to respond to the mission that God would have us go on. We miss the opportunity to see God in our midst, the true authority in the room. It's easy to get caught up in power and ego. What do we expect? Do we expect, really, that God will come out of his house and pay his respects to us while he heals us, like Naaman? Do we really expect that God will recognize those that we think of as sinners and shoo them away for our own benefit? What do we expect from God? My suggestion to you is to remove your expectations from God and instead assume that God is present within and around you. Be open to what God suggests for your life, even when it comes from unexpected people or unexpected ways. And never, ever expect God to come to you, but instead open your eyes to all that God is already giving you. Amen.